I met this girl when I was 10 years old, and what I love most, she had so much soul. Hey everybody, it's Old School Heart. I hope that you have entered into 2021 with happiness and joy and peace. I know it has been chaotic already, I understand. But I do hope that you're prospering. I do hope that you're reaching those goals. I do hope that you're spending some time to self-reflect, to self-assess yourself, and to just keep going even as we go through these chaotic moments. So welcome to 2021. I'm so glad that you're here with me. I am so excited to be starting YouTube again. I did a couple of shows on Facebook just to see how they would go, but YouTube is home. YouTube is where I got my start, of course. And so happy 2021 to you guys. I hope that this year that you find my videos to be interesting, informational, and that you're able to share them throughout all of the platforms that we have here. So to begin 2021, I wanted to start off with a review. I've done a lot of reviews over the years, but I wanted to start off with a review that with a movie that I was looking forward to since I heard about it a long time ago. And that is on the movie One Night in Miami. One Night in Miami premiered Friday on Amazon Prime. So if you have not watched this, there's going to be some spoiler alerts. So if you have not watched it, go ahead and watch it and then come back and look at the review. So it premiered on Amazon Prime on Friday. I actually got a chance to see it a little bit early. I was given an early access pass. So I actually saw it last Monday. And today is MLK Day. So I saw it last Monday. Then I watched it, of course, again with you guys on this weekend. This is Regina King's directorial debut. I know that she has done a couple of things with television shows and different things like that, but she has not actually done a full-length movie. And so this is her very first one. So I was super excited to see this movie, One Night in Miami, because they based it on four beloved leaders in our community, Muhammad Ali, Malcolm X, Sam Cooke, and Jim Brown. So I was really looking forward to it because I wanted to hear what type of story it would be. Okay, so the four roles were played by some you may be familiar with and some people that you may not be familiar with. We do have Aldis Hodge. I don't know if you guys remember Aldis Hodge, but he was in that hit show Underground on WGN America. So sad that it went off when it was getting really, really good. So Aldis Hodge plays Jim Brown's character in One Night in Miami. We also have Eli Ellery or Gorey. I don't know. I may have his name wrong, but he plays Ali. And he was in that show Ballers on HBO. I didn't watch that show at all, but I did hear some really good things about it. And I believe, if I'm not mistaken, The Rock is on Ballers as well. So it is a really good show. I just haven't watched it before. Then we have Kingsley Ben-Addis. He's a Canadian actor. He plays Malcolm X. Don't know too much about him. He seems to be a very young actor. And so don't know any familiar roles of his other than this one, of course, that will kind of catapult him. And then we have Leslie Odom Jr. And of course, we know him from Hamilton. And he plays Sam Cooke, because he can sing. And I will say this, if you have not listened to Leslie Odom Jr.'s Christmas album, put that on your list next year to listen to his Christmas album. It was super, super dope. So we have these four people along with some supporting actors, actresses as well, playing this part. Okay, so the first part of One Night in Miami basically deals with four probably dramatic or tragic or sad parts of each of the four character stories, right? So we have Ali, who loses his first fight, one of his first fights. we have Jim Brown, who is going to visit one of the coaches that he grew up with, somebody that he respected. He asked him, hey, did you need any help in the house? And this man says, you're not allowed to enter my house. No nigger is allowed to enter my house, or black person is allowed to enter my house. You have Malcolm X, who basically had told a couple of people in the Nation of Islam about the indiscretions of their leader. And basically, you know, they rejected or refused to pay any attention to what was being said. And they basically told him, hey, you know, we're not going to follow you anywhere. We don't believe you. We're still going to be under the Honorable Elijah Muhammad. And it is what it is. So you have, you know, him talking about that. And then you have Sam Cooke, who sings at the Copacabana, and it's not a good performance. You know, people are leaving as he's trying to sing. People are uninterested. And so this is how One Night in Miami starts off. So the crux of the story basically is what happens after Ali wins his fight with Sonny Liston, which of course everyone knows that it was predicted that he would never win the fight with Sonny Liston, that he would never beat him. But then of course we know that he is victorious. And so this is what happens after the fight. So they go to the Hampton House. Now, I do want to talk about the Hampton House just a little bit. In the 1960s, the Hampton House was a refuge for a segregated Miami. And so a lot of the black elites, a lot of the prominent blacks were not able to be in some of the swankiest hotels in Miami. And so the Hampton House was a haven for the elite, for, you know, people like Muhammad Ali and Sam Cooke. This was a place for them to stay. This was a refuge. The Hampton House was also a place for civil rights conversations. We do know that Martin Luther King met there a couple of times for different meetings that were being had about some of the civil rights things that were going on. There's even a picture of him in his swimming trunks in at the Hampton House. And so basically, you know, the Hampton House was a place for, you know, the blacks to come together. You know, it was a place that they could meet because they were refused in other areas. The Hampton House was located in Liberty City in Miami. It did have a restaurant, it had a jazz club, and it had a swimming pool. So you can see why there was such an interest in going to the Hampton. So the core of the movie is between these four men, right? And they're at the Hampton House. Muhammad Ali has just won. And basically there starts a conversation, right? Between all of these men. Jim Brown is really just eager just to go out and have a good time. You know, he wants to see some women, you know, kind of profit off of the fact that Muhammad Ali just won. Sam Cooke is basically the same way. He wants to get down. He wants to sing. He wants to have a good time. Malcolm X and Muhammad Ali, you know, well, following Malcolm X, Malcolm X wants more of a solemn night, a reflective night. And basically he becomes like the leader in this whole, in this movie. You know, he becomes the star point in this movie because he's, of course, not going to go out. He's not going to go to a club or anything like that because he still is following the rules of a Muslim. So no drinking and, you know, doing other things like that. And so basically what you begin to see is just conversations between the four men, and sometimes these conversations splitting into two people or three people. One of the things throughout this movie that was interesting was the conflict between Sam Cooke and also Malcolm X. And so there's this conflict between the two of them throughout the entire movie, where basically you have Malcolm X challenging Sam Cooke to make a better imprint on the community, to make a better imprint on how he does, how he moves about. And Sam Cooke is basically defending, you know, the ways in which he is navigating through Hollywood, the way he's navigating through the music scene. You have Ali, who's basically, you know, kind of a middleman in the whole situation. He definitely understands Malcolm X's opinion about Sam Cooke, but he respects Sam Cooke as well and understands his standpoint as well. And then you have Jim Brown, who's once again the mediator as well in between the two. You know, so there are a number of conversations that happen while this is going on. You have Sam, who's having a hard time dealing with Malcolm X and his judging and his ability to not understand that what Sam Cooke is doing is a way of improving the community by making sure that he owns things outright and making clear pathways for other people in the community. Definitely brought up the Womack family, Bobby Womack, we know. And, you know, there's a conversation between him and Jim where he's explaining that. And then there's a conversation between him and Muhammad Ali where he's explaining that. You know, you have a conversation between Malcolm X and Jim Brown where Malcolm X reveals to Jim Brown that, you know, he fears for his life. You know, he will be leaving the nation. You know, he tells Jim this. You know, he tells him that, you know, there's a lot going on. You know, so they have that talk. So there's just a lot of different conversations that's going on throughout this movie. You have Malcolm X, who finally reveals to Muhammad Ali that he will be leaving the Nation of Islam. Muhammad Ali, of course, is stunned by this news because, you know, he's kind of like unsure about how he's going to navigate himself through the Nation of Islam, you know, and already is unsure of it. And I guess in this movie, Malcolm X provides some type of certainty for him so that there's a conflict there as well. Then you have Jim, who basically reveals that, you know, he's done really good in the NFL, but, you know, he still feels some barriers there. And he's found a sanctuary in Hollywood. He's found a sanctuary in acting. And he was thinking about giving up his career in the NFL to be a full-time actor. And so there's just a lot of moving parts in this movie. There's a lot of different conversations in this movie. So one of the things that I do want to say is what I loved about this movie is, of course, Leslie Odom Jr.'s voice was quite amazing. He sings very, very well. He portrayed Sam Cooke's voice very, very well. I did appreciate that. I appreciated Muhammad Ali in this as well. You know, him mentioning how pretty he was, and him actually being that pretty. The body of Muhammad Ali and just some of the characteristics were pretty dead on, and I appreciated that. I had a little bit of a hard time with Jim Brown, believing that, you know, Eldest was Jim Brown in this. That was kind of unbelievable. And Kingsley, I believe he looked just like Malcolm X. And so I do love the directorial debut of Regina King. I think she did a really good job directing this movie, you know, especially for it being her first time. I think she did quite well with this movie. I do love that there was, even though it was fictional, there was some truth in a couple of things that happened there. So the fact of Muhammad Ali eating ice cream that night, there is a record of him actually doing so at the Hampton House that night. Okay, guys, now that I have, you know, walked you guys through the movie, what I loved about it, I do want to talk about something that's very, very important. So bear with me. Bear with me as I discuss this. even though, you know, it's advertised that this is a fictionalized story, right? So we know that this is a fictionalized story. As a person in the Black community who loves history, who loves knowing information about our Black leaders of the past, reading books, listening to documentaries, listening to account stories of other people, I think it's very important for us to protect our stories and also how they're told. One of the issues that I have with One Night in Miami is that although it's fictionalized, if we aren't careful in the way that we tell our story, people will begin to believe that it's true. People will begin to believe and distort truth in that fictionalized story. So that's one of the things that I am always in fear of when you're using characters that are very, very real, that were real people, and you're telling a story that is untrue about them. And so I'm very, very protective of our leaders. I'm very, very protective of their stories, their characters, their mannerisms, and different things like that. Even in fiction, when you're dealing with real life people, I do expect for the characters, how they behave, their personalities, I do still believe that they should be portrayed accurately. In watching this film, I had a hard time with Malcolm X and Sam Cooke's character. I had a hard time with this idea that Malcolm X and Sam Cooke would have so much of a derision with each other, have so much conflict with each other. Because if you look at the character of Malcolm X, I don't think that you see a judgy man like what you saw in One Night in Miami. Especially on a night where Malcolm X just won. I don't think that you see a big conflict with the two of them. And I'm still trying to wrap my brain around why Kemp Powers thought that those two men would have a conflict. That Malcolm X, although Malcolm was very outspoken about how he felt about different things, you know, what he thought the Black community needed, how he felt the Black community would navigate, I do feel as if there is no way possible that he would have had that big of a conflict with Sam Cooke. To the point where he's puts on a record by Bob Dylan telling him how or what his next musical influence or what his next musical debut should be. You know, I doubt that Malcolm X would have ever had a Bob Dylan record and told my man Sam Cooke, this is what you need to be doing. First of all, you know, if anybody knows Malcolm X was very much influenced by jazz. He loved jazz. He knew a lot of jazz people before he became Malcolm X, when he was Malcolm Little, you know, Shorty or whatever else you wanted to call him. I mean, Red, whatever else you wanted to call him. You know, he was in the musical scene. And so there are so many other influences and other names that Malcolm X could have used that I doubt highly he would have chosen Bob Dylan, Blowing in the Wind, to compare to Sam Cooke's work and what Sam Cooke should be doing. That's bullshit. We know it's bullshit. And it was hard to look at that and go, why would Malcolm X do that? First of all, why would he even have the cassette with him. That's just, it's unbelievable. You know, not only that, you know, Malcolm X respected Sam Cooke. Malcolm X respected the work of Sam Cooke because Sam Cooke was out there creating a lane for Black people. You know, he was out there making sure that he actually owned his own record label, that he brought in other artists, you know, and that he worked to have ownership of everything that he put his hands on. And so this idea that Malcolm X would ever be offended, would ever be judgy, would ever criticize the work of Sam Cooke is just downright unbelievable and untrue. Another thing that really surprised me in the movie was at the very beginning when, you know, Malcolm X is talking to his wife, Betty, and she asks, did Louis X accept, you know, the secret about the Honorable Elijah Muhammad. If you're not familiar with who Louis X is Louis Farrakhan. You know, he is the Farrakhan now, but back then he was known as Louis X. He was the leader of the Boston Temple, only one Boston Temple at the time. And he also was a contributing writer for the Muslim paper, which I can't even think of the name of it right now. I'm so sorry, Daddy. But he was a contributing writer of the paper. So, you know, what gets me about this is, like, you know, people act like Louis X had this, like Louis Farrakhan had this, like, influence back then, you know, and it was all up to Louis, you know. It was all up to Louis, you know. If Louis would have left with Malcolm X, it would have destroyed the Nation of Islam. No, that is so untrue. Louis at the time did not have any power. He just didn't. He was a leader of the Boston Mosque, you know, but he did not have any influence. And so the fact that they put Louis Farrakhan in this, Louis X in this, and made it appear as if, you know, Betty was just furious that, you know, he didn't really fall for the story of Honorable Elijah Muhammad, and, you know, he decided that he was going to stay, and that, you know, Malcolm X shouldn't do this. To me, I mean, come on. You know, we have to be accurate about these stories in some way, you know. And the fact that Betty was pressed about this whole thing, and she was crying and all of this stuff, it's just a little fabricated. Not even a little, it's a lot fabricated. And I think even if you're imagining what it would have been like to be there that night with the four of those men, I think that you have to at least be accurate. I did notice this, or I did feel this way. There was a play actually that was really popular in the 90s about Martin and Malcolm, and what a day in the life would have been like if Martin and Malcolm would have met and had time to sit and dialogue with each other for a long time. And so basically in this play, you will see basically articles that were written, speeches and different things that were written about the two men that conflict with each other. And so basically they meet and they're arguing these 2 points. And at the end, they come to a decision that at the end of the day, they just want the best for Black people, you know. And so there's this imagined dialogue between the two. And so I kind of felt like that's what One Night in Miami was trying to do, was basically take the talking points of Malcolm X, take the talking points of Sam Cooke, some things that they've said in the media and books and, you know, different interviews in that way, and conflict the two together. But even that doesn't justify the fact that these two men would have never, ever had the emotional responses to each other like what One Night in Miami offered. They just wouldn't have ever had that. There would have never been a reason to have that. And I just felt like it was over exaggerated. I felt like Malcolm X was very pushy, very argumentative, very judgy. and just not a kind person. And if you know Malcolm X, although he's very outspoken, he is a smart man. He's an intelligent man. To start a conflict during a time of victory would have been dumb on his part. And not only that, to start a conflict with a man that the reality is he admired would have been even more idiotic. So that was one issue that I had with the movie. Let's move on to another issue that I had. The opening scene with Jim Brown, right? Where he's sitting there talking to this man that he respected, and he's come back down south, you know, and he's telling him about Hollywood and how Hollywood is treating him and blah, 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 blah. Which I really felt like Jim Brown really didn't have a big part in this movie at all. You know, so for me, this whole idea that Jim Brown would offer to help this guy move furniture, and this guy would say, there are no black people allowed in my house. The Jim Brown that we know just walked away from that. We're gonna go with Jim Brown being silent and not saying nothing and not beat nobody ass. Yeah, that's not gonna work out for me. That's not gonna work out for me. And then this idea of Muhammad Ali, who's really, really goofy in this, who really, one of the biggest things about this was the fact that when Malcolm X told Muhammad Ali that he would be leaving the Nation of Islam and starting something new, you know, Muhammad Ali is just overly just like, wait a minute, you can't do this, and just is angry and walks out of the room and is just, you know, uncertain about being in the nation. You know, the true story is, you know, Muhammad Ali joined the nation way before he won against Sonny Liston. He had already tried to join the nation even before the Sonny Liston thing, but, you know, wasn't allowed to come in because they just thought he was kind of a clown. You know, they thought that him being a part of the nation would not be progressive. And then after, you know, as close to, you know, as his name gets big, he is allowed to join the Nation of Islam. You know, and he never came in through Malcolm X. You know, he came in through another person, but was guided by Malcolm X. So this idea that, you know, he was so uncertain about his position is quite telling to me. You know, also, you know, even with Sam Cooke, you know, having this just reflection, you know, when he heard, you know, Bob Dylan's record, Blowing in the Wind, and, you know, really wrestling with the idea of doing that type of music and how could he put out music that, you know, would make a difference in the community. First of all, Sam Cooke started off in gospel music. So he had already started knowing, you know, he had already started knowing, you know, how to inspire. He had already knew how to uplift. He had already been in those conversations in the church house, probably millions of times, where they discussed, you know, moving towards civil liberties, moving towards revolution. And so this idea that, you know, he, you know, was inspired by Bob to make, you know, music that was revolutionary, music that was forward thinking during that time. It's just some bullshit. It just is, you know, like the idea that Sam, you know, listened to Blowing in the Wind and it just started this fire within him. You know, Sam Cooke was a smart man. Sam Cooke was a strategic man. And I guarantee you change gonna come and different things like that was already deep within him, you know. And so number one, he didn't need a spanking from Muhammad Ali. And he definitely didn't need Bob Dylan to influence him to make really good music. So that was a couple of things that I noticed throughout this movie that, like I said, I understand it's fictionalized. But when you have real characters and you study them and you know them and you've read about them and you have listened to interviews and different things like that, you walk away with a better understanding of who these people were. And for me, even though it's fictionalized, I feel like the story could have been told a whole lot better. You know, I know for sure that it wouldn't have been a conflict. I know for sure that Muhammad Ali wouldn't be so goofy in this and so uncertain about what he wanted to do and how he wanted to navigate his life. Jim, we didn't get that much information from to begin with. So, but even with Jim, you know, being minute during the situation, it's just unbelievable. And then, you know, Malcolm X, you know, revealing that he has a book by, you know, Alex Haley coming out. That was stuff that he did not tell anybody because he did not want it to get out. And then Betty and the kids weren't taken care of just in case of his demise. You know, Malcolm X crying to Jim Brown. That's impossible. You know, it's just not something that would happen. When has anybody ever heard Malcolm break down like that? You know, Malcolm has solemn moments. I'm not saying that. But why would he have that particular moment with Jim Brown? And why would, out of the four of them, he would reveal to Jim Brown first that he was leaving the nation? You know, there's just certain parts of this is just like, even though you imagine this, like, I don't want to cuss. But, you know, take this movie out with a grain of salt, but understand this, when people know certain information, they're going to critique it harder. They're going to look at some of the things that were said and wonder, you know, what the motive was. You know what I'm saying? What did you expect to happen from this? You know what I'm saying? And so for me, my thing was, what was the motive in this story? And what did you hope that people would get out of this? You know, for me, I can't do anything but go, this was just not very good from what I know. And maybe I know too much. And maybe I love these leaders in our community so much that even the fictionalized stuff that I do here, I want it to be as accurate to their character as possible. And so that is my problem with this movie. Is that even though it is fictionalized, I still want it to fit the character. And I'm not talking about the little goofy mannerisms and different things like that, you know, but it's important that, you know, our leaders are captured accurately. And so shout out to Regina King. I think she's got some more brilliant things that she's going to be able to do. I ranked this movie a good D. A good D, because I could not. And so let me know what you guys thought about One Night in Miami. Let me know, you know, how you felt about the conflict between Malcolm X and Sam Cooke. How you felt about the four men together and what you think would have happened on that one night in Miami. This is Old School Heart. I hope you have a great rest of the day. Bye-bye.